Historical Society on BCTV is supported in part by the Highlands at Wyomissing.
Hello and welcome to the monthly program of the Historical Society of Berks County. I'm your host, George M. Miser IX, President of the Historical Society of Berks County and publisher of the Historical Review of Berks County, the Society's quarterly magazine in print since October of 1935. Not incidentally, most back issues of the Historical Review remain available from the late 1930s to the present one. It should be noted that this program is telecast live on the first Wednesday of each month at 7. It repeats this Friday at 10, Saturday at 6, and Sunday morning at 9 a.m. And welcome all to the September 2009 program. Seated beside me is Joshua Blay, Society Museum Curator and Associate Director. Hello. Beside Joshua is someone who didn't quite, Patrick Hornberger, guest curator for the Society's upcoming Berks County Rifle exhibit and compiler and author of an upcoming book that's titled Berks County Long Rifles and Gun Makers, 1750 to 1900. And last but not least is Janice Longlot, longtime member of the Historical Society of Berks County and our publicity specialist. And we're pleased to have you all here with us this evening.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Our museum, Henry Johnson Library, and Museum Store and Special Exhibition Hall on World War I and World War II exhibit are open Tuesday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. We are closing this Friday at 2 o'clock and will be closed Saturday in observance of Labor Day. Our gift shop has just about finished a recent renovation. We've got some wonderful sales going up to about 70-75% off. Hopefully you've seen a couple of our ads in the Reading Eagle newspaper. We're getting ready for some new stock, so please come in and check out the new sales and please be ready for our new stock. We have a wonderful selection of books, pottery, and probably the best selection of local Berks County history books.
We remind viewers that for $40 a year, you can be one of us, a member of the Historical Society of Berks County. Membership in the Society includes our prize-winning quarterly magazine, the Historical Review of Berks County. Membership includes unlimited use of the museum and library. Incidentally, family memberships, all living in the same household, are $50 a year.
And you know, George, while we're on the subjects of memberships, we remind you that Berks Community TV, BCTV, is a survivor and a tough venue and unique entity in that it's interactive. You are encouraged to call in with your questions and comments to 610-378-0426.
Why not salute BCTV for all the great shows it provides to Reading and Berks, and send a check for $30 for a year's membership. Mail your check to BCTV, 645 Penn Street, Reading, Pennsylvania, 19601. Remember, time passes, but operating expenses never go away.
I'm very pleased to announce, maybe you've heard the buzz on the street, that there is definitely going to be a new edition of The Passing Scene number 17. We still don't know the color cover yet, but it should be coming in about 12 weeks. The Passing Scene Volume 17 will be released on Saturday, December 5th, just in time for the holidays. Among the top features of the upcoming volume are never-seen photos of Carsonia Park, the building and operation of the Never Sink Mountain Railroad, Robisonia Furnace's history, the story of Berks artist Ben Austrian, whose Perkiomen Avenue log cabin and chick paintings are well known locally and nationally, and lavishly illustrated stories about Reading master accordionist Anthony Mondi and Roy Smeck, internationally celebrated Wizard of the Strings, who appeared in many films and on some 400 recordings.
Yes, he was a Reading boy born on Hudson Street across from the old ice house, those who remember the old ice house on Hudson Street. A few copies of Volume 15 and 16 remain for sale at $45, tax included. There are some 13s, aren't there?
Yes, there are. Volume 13 is available for sale. We have a special cash and carry price of $30, $35 if you want it mailed to you.
We remind you that once these are sold, there will be no reprints. And in full realization of the present economic situation, we're keeping the selling price of the upcoming Volume 17 at $45, tax included, mailed anywhere for $50. Joshua?
Well, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce to my left, to your right, Patrick Hornberger, who's our guest curator for our upcoming rifle exhibit. We've been hard at work working on the premier exhibit in our former Palmer Library, which we now call our Palmer Gallery. We've got together a wonderful collection of 54 rifles. Much of those are from private lenders, hardly ever on view before. And Patrick has been nice enough to join us and come up for a trip and bring some goodies along and talk to us about the exhibit. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. We have, 54 rifles, along with 2 pistols and a number of tools from gun makers from both all around Berks County, including a large collection of gun barrels from the Wyomissing Creek gun barrel makers. And some of the quick highlights of the show are, as you all I'm sure know, in 1752 Reading was founded as a city. At that time, ironically, I should say ironically because it seems rather hard to believe that there were 4 major gun makers in Reading in 1752. One of those was a fellow who came from a gun maker who we think was trained in Switzerland on the German border. His name was Wolfgang Haga, and this is one of his rifles here. This is a classic Wolfgang Haga rifle. This was probably made in the 1750s or 60s. In Reading, we're not sure quite where he worked, but most of the gun makers at that time worked on Court Street, Washington Street, 4th Street, some of those areas. Out of the Reading group, we have, there were 4 of those makers, and we have all 4 of those examples from each of those 4 in the show, including the first signed and dated American rifle, which was made by John Shrite in Reading in 1761.
And that's not just Berks County, that's the entire country, and that's amazing to me.
Yeah. And we also have them from the other regions. We've broken down the county into 5 centers. This, of course, is Reading, as I mentioned. This gun is from Wilmersdorf. This is Anthony Fricker. Fricker's a very important maker of Berks County for lots of reasons. One, he was heavily related. His mother was the daughter of Conrad Weiser, and he worked in Wilmersdorf and sold guns to Beneville Kime and John Reed and some very important people of Berks County.
Want to see if you can hold that one up and get a close shot there?
Yeah, the Wilmersdorf makers are known mostly for their carving. As you can see, if you can get a close-up on that carving, the detail's amazing. This gun, he died in right after the turn of the century, probably 1810 or somewhere in that area. This gun was probably made in the late 1700s. Ironically, there were 4 or 5 makers in Wilmersdorf at that time. It amazes most of us that study these guns that they would be in Wilmersdorf. We believe that the real reason was that Wilmersdorf was the gateway to the west, to Susquehanna and Harrisburg, so the gun makers were able to capture that audience on the way west. At the same time, though, this guy was living, so we still have a market in Reading as well. This is a beautiful gun. This is the first time this gun's ever been seen in public, and it has never been in a show.
And you saw it first here on BCTV.
That's a gorgeous thing.
Then out of the other centers, this is a later gun. This is by Gideon Angstadt, one of the famous Angstadt makers of Berks County. In the case of Gideon, he worked in the Maxatawny Township, where most of them worked in and around Kutztown and Maxatawny. This is a later gun, later compared to those 2, that is. This is about an 1825 or so.
See if you can get a good view of that patch box. It's amazing. This little motif here on the patch box, as Patrick can tell you, that's a very common decoration. All the different people embellish it in different ways.
In that area, in the northern Berks County, along the Lehigh County border and the Blue Mountains, the foot of the Blue Mountains. This particular gun, as I say, is a little bit, we consider somewhat overdone. As you can see, it's got brass all the way down here. It's got brass patch box, brass along the top. He also added a little piece back here as support. And then he also has it under here, which we call a saddle strap. These guns were often carried on a saddle this way, so you need a little support under there to not wear down the wood, so to speak. The guns that we couldn't bring, because we couldn't bring them all, since there's 54, were the guns from the Ole Valley area, and that would include people like John Durr
We've got
Henry Mauger.
Here's the graphic from the map, from the book.
Yeah, I think the graphic on the screen will show you the Ole Valley area that we have. This is an arbitrary decision on our part. Of course, the city of Reading. And then below the Schuylkill, there were two makers, John Schaff, and he was related, trained by Mauger, and then the famous Pannebecker family. I mentioned earlier the Angstats. They were essentially the dynasty of Berks County gun makers. There were 8 of them, and ironically, there were 7 of the Pannebecker family that made rifles and or gun barrels, and they were south of the Schuylkill.
One thing that's amazing to me in this collection, that we've had a lot of them, as Patrick mentioned, never seen before in public, and we owe a lot of thanks to the Kindig family. Joe Kindig, was it Sr.? Joe Kindig Sr.?
Joe Kindig Sr. is sort of a legend in this business. He's had an amazing collection of 300 and some of these rifles. He was buying them at the time when they were $12 a piece or so.
Oh, yeah.
Today we have, I mean, for instance, this Fricker rifle that I mentioned, just for fun, I'd have to say that that could be sold for $80,000 today.
Wow. But we owe a lot of thanks to the family. 14 of the 54 rifles in the exhibit are from the Kindig family, and one of our trustees, Stephanie Kindig, we owe a lot of thanks to her as well for making this possible, for really heightening the interest in the exhibit. And we're also very pleased to announce that Patrick, much to his joy, has also written a book, a 4-color hardbound book, which we have a mock-up right here on the table. Why don't you get in close on that? This is the first book of its kind, as I understand it, on Berks County rifles, and that will be available for the show. We're accepting, we were accepting pre-orders already for the book. Thinking about $59.95, not including tax. But as you can see, it's going to be a hardbound book, color. And the neat thing of the book is all the rifles in the book are going to be numbered. And the rifles in the exhibit will have a corresponding number to correspond with the rifles in the exhibit itself.
Correct. The book is essentially a catalog of the exhibit. But I must say that based on a lot of my contemporary, that everyone seems to agree that this is a very important exhibit in terms of Berks County guns, but also an important exhibit in terms of American early guns. Berks County was very important in that history, and this show has never been done here. The last show, to be honest with you, that has been done of anything of the magnitude of this show was done in York, Pennsylvania in 1972, so that tells you how long ago a major exhibit has been held.
Now, you're from Berks County, Patrick. I think the people at home might find it interesting how you got to be interested in Pennsylvania long rifles, specifically Berks County long rifles.
I was brought up in Mountain, right on the Wyomissing Creek, so to speak, and my family, Cyrus Hornberger, was actually a gun barrel maker, and as a kid, I was always hearing about gun barrels, you know, because in Mountain it's hard to get around that fact. There were 45 of them in Mountain at one time. And when you're brought up that way, you sort of you figure that, you know, someday you might buy one of those. Well, I sold the company and made some money and decided to get into it.
Very, very interesting. Tell me again who that gun maker was in Ole Valley.
Well, there were a number of them. Henry Mauger, one of the more famous ones. Mauger taught John Durr. John Durr was a very prolific maker, a very interesting character in my mind, because Durr was the only one up until after the Civil War that actually had a sense of marketing. His guns always have his name on them. On the top here, John Durr. If it's a cheap gun, he stamped it. If it's a more elegant gun, he would put it in script. And one of the guns in the show, actually 2 of them in the show, we have 3 Durrs. We have two Durr rifles and 1 pistol. And the 2 Durr rifles we have are both his high-end guns, so they have the script part on them, and the date. And they also have, which is interesting, which is rare in most of these guns, is it will say John Durr Ole, 1831 in the case of one of the rifles, 1829 in the case of another. And he's been shown through my research to be very ahead of his time in terms of marketing. He ran advertising in the Reading Adler. I have seen at least 2 cases of rifles where the patch box, which is right here, I don't know if this will open, yes it will, he would put a cardboard piece down there and have John Durr Rifles Ole Valley for sale, sort of thing. So which is very unusual for those guys. Mostly they were just quietly making their guns and selling them to their special clientele or to the masses. None of these guns would you consider the average man's gun. These are all for the high-end market at that time. And again, it's hard to relate, but we do know that Fricker kept a ledger, so we have a pretty good sense of his prices. And this gun would probably sell for $16 in the late 1700s, which was a lot of money.
That was a lot of money.
That's about that's over $200 today, I believe.
At least.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
I must admit, I was a rifle. I wish I had found a Rifles for Dummies book when I first got the exhibit started, but Mr. Hornberger and our executive director, Sam Bertolet, and another gentleman by the name of Paul Allison, who makes these rifles from scratch today, because people are still very interested in this, and there's a huge collector's hobby, but there are a number of people making them from scratch. One of the questions I had, first off, we can ask Patrick, what makes a Berks County rifle a Berks County rifle? I was wondering if you could use one of these examples.
Well, I can show you a couple things real on this rifle. I'm afraid I have to hold it up. If you look at the profile of this, I'm not sure how shot you can get of that. This nice curve and elegant roll in the bottom. This is called a Roman nose profile. This is a Berks County feature. If you see guns with that, it's probably Berks County made. Not necessarily, because a lot of these guys were trained in Berks County and then moved into other areas in Schuylkill County, Dauphin County, and so forth. Another feature of Berks County guns is a wide trigger guard. This is an inch here. Western Pennsylvania guns were very narrow, and they rarely had anything that wide. Other features are carving on the tang area, and also the little details is what we collectors look for to identify rifles. Incidentally, Wolfgang Haga never signed a gun. This is an attributed to him rifle. This side plate, as we call it, has a little edge right here. That's a typical Berks County thing. And matter of fact, most of the Womelsdorf makers used that. And even though this guy was in Reading, it seems that there was a connection somehow with the Reading makers and the Womelsdorf makers in order to have that very similar design. That also, another smaller feature is the length of this muzzle cap is much longer than most of them, I believe, even longer than anything else we have here. For instance, give an example, if this Bucks County rifle would be way up here, about a half of an inch. It's also rounded here. That's on the crown. That is somewhat of a Berks, more of a Reading thing than the total of Berks County. And I think, while we're on that subject, the interesting thing about Berks County guns is they vary so much. The 5 centers are, although they're arbitrary in our geography, the way we designed that in both the book and the exhibit, are actually 5 centers of style. This gun, as you can see, is a Reading gun. The Womelsdorf guns do not necessarily look like the Reading guns, and the same is true of when you get into the northern, into the Kutztown area, what we call the Blue Mountain gun makers. And so you'll still see this. You'll still see the Roman nose. In fact, this one's even more exaggerated than Haga's. But you don't see the difference. See the difference in the side plate. You'll start to see differences. There's no carving here. Even the muzzle cap is smaller. So you do run into different styles. And the 5 areas each have different styles.
Well, thank you very much, Patrick. If you want to see the 50 other rifles we're going to have, along with the powder horns and the rifle-making tools, we're going to have our opening on Saturday, September 12th at 10 o'clock. Now, since the Labor Day weekend falls on later this year, along with just about all the other holidays this year, we're going to be closed, as I mentioned, for the Labor Day weekend. But our first Saturday program is actually going to coincide with our opening lecture provided by Mr. Hornberger on Saturday, September 12th at 10 o'clock. So please join us for our opening. Following the lecture by Mr. Hornberger, we'll be opening up the exhibit itself. But that's Saturday, September 12th at 10 o'clock in the morning. So we hope you can join us for that program.
Josh.
Yes.
What about the new gallery? The Palmer
Yes,
gallery. Did you mention
Oh,
that?
yes. Oh, yes.
Did you?
Yep.
Sorry.
That's okay. We'll mention it just in case. The exhibit is in our former Palmer Library, which is now called our Palmer Gallery. The library moved across the street last fall to our new Henry Janssen Library. So this is the premier exhibit in the Palmer Gallery.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Patrick.
It'll be something very special. Okay, we're going to shift gears, and I'm going to give you a little sneak preview of some of the pictures that are coming up. I'll keep the explanation short, and let you look at some unusual photographs. The book will have probably 375 to 380 different pictures. There are quite a few now and then photographs, and a lot of pictures within. So we have a home viewer. Yes, home viewer. Home viewer, you're on.
Yes. Mr. Miser.
Yes.
First of all, that was very, very interesting, and the gentleman with the rifles there. Beautiful, beautiful work. But I want to know something. I have a large amount of people that are interested on the Four Centuries tour, and I want to know, you are going to be our tour guide when we tour the Four Centuries tour in October?
I think Charlie Adams is going to be doing that.
What do you mean? You mean you're not going to be our tour guide?
Possibly not. I have taken a 2-month leave of absence for reasons of health.
Oh.
And I will not be coming back to the society. Our vice president has taken over for the interim, and I will be back in October, but I will not be there for the Four Centuries tour.
Oh, Mr. Miser, this will never go. This will never work, because I have so many people. We could probably have 2 bus loads. And they want to see you because you were just so wonderful. I mean, they don't want to go on a ghost tour. That's what they'll think. I know they will. Trust me. I know how they think. But, oh, my. So you don't think you're going to be our tour guide?
I don't think so.
Oh, my gracious.
But Charlie Adams, who has the radio program in the morning.
Yes.
And HSBC trustee.
Yes, and Historical Society trustee will be functioning in my stead. I don't think I will be there.
Well, I'm glad I found out, because I know they won't go.
Oh.
I mean, this will be a no-no. And this is sad, because it's a lot of people, and they surely did enjoy you. I mean, there's only one Mr. Miser, I'm sorry, and only one Mr. Miser can do Mr. Miser's job.
Thank you for the kind words.
Listen, sir, I want to ask you something.
Yes.
Do you remember a store by the name of Nizel that was on,
yes,
on Penn Avenue in West Reading?
Yes, he had stock in there from 1920.
Oh, my gracious.
Yes, I remember Mr. Nizel. There's a Chinese restaurant that occupies that building today.
Okay, and it was, would you say it's across from where the Chef Allen's is?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember when the store closed up?
I started teaching in West Reading in, I'm going to guess about 1970 they might have closed.
Okay. All right.
I remember that store. I went in there to buy glue one time, and I did buy glue. Unfortunately, it was all dried up. But I did patronize their store.
My gracious.
Mm-hmm.
Well, see, only you would know that. Mr. Adams wouldn't know that.
Oh, I'm sure he might.
Well, listen, you take very, very good care of yourself, and maybe one day you'll be able to give us a private tour.
Oh, well,
Believe
we'll certainly
me.
see.
Okay, you take good care, and thank you again.
Thank you for your interest.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, if we can have the monitor. Are we all set? Oops. Ah, he was sleeping. Do we have a picture? Okay. This is a really very interesting picture that came to us by way of Chris Papadakis from West Lawn. In 1925, this gentleman went into business. He bought a brand new 1925 Ford Model T truck. And if you look at the side on the door, it says phonograph repairs and piano service. In the back it says tuning and repairing grands, player pianos, and reproducing pianos, Alan Fichthorn, 728 Chestnut. What Mr. Fichthorn didn't know in 1925 was that everything that he did was coming to a screeching halt. 1925, they switched over to electric recording. Electric records came out. The machines they sold very few wind-up phonographs. And with the coming of the Depression in 1929, all sales of player pianos and reproducing pianos came to a screeching halt. So what did Mr. Fichthorn do? Well, in the early 30s, he became a piano tuner. And then shortly after that, in the middle 30s, he was a salesman for some sort of a company where you went door to door. And the last time I found any mention of him was in 1940, where he was a bartender, and then he left Reading. I'm sorry, Mr. Hornberger sort of missed this one. This I went looking for. I apologize for it not being any larger. I don't know whether I can, how do I increase the size of that? I'll tell you what that is.
Might be able to do it a little bit here.
To zoom in.
There you go.
Oh, that's better. I went looking for that. That is a gun maker who was located on, let me see, would today be Sportsman's Road. You go up 422 heading to the Wernersville area, and you would turn into the Wernersville State Hospital grounds, and you go back to where the old mill stands right along the main road. You make a little right at Sportsman's Road, and it would take you back into an area that's very heavily wooded with a little creek running through, and the filtering house for the hospital is up there. That would have been very close to where the filtering house is today. That's a painting that we have at the Historical Society. That was a gun maker's shop, and it would have been along, I don't know whether that was Furnace Creek or which one that was. What's back there today? Well, from what I understand, absolutely nothing. And I was also informed that I was trespassing on hospital grounds. But I could find nothing, and I asked a policeman, and he has no knowledge of any ruins left.
The weather has forwarded us so far, but that painting will be on display as part of the exhibit.
That's a good one, because I know exactly where it was.
Yep.
I imagine some of the home viewers will recognize that. That's the West Reading Drug Store. I think is still in business. This picture was taken back in the 1920s, and I'll keep my explanation short because I have a rather lengthy write-up on all of these things in point of fact. West Reading, Rexall, remember, most of us remember when there were lots of Rexall drug stores. The West Reading Drug Store, Janice?
Yes.
On the left side, on the south side of Penn Avenue.
Still go there.
They still go there. Okay. This is a really very interesting early shot. That is Sightsinger's Mine Hole, and what's there today? The parking lot for the Masonic Temple and the Masonic Temple itself. That was on the west side of the Reading Hospital grounds. That was Sightsinger's iron mine. One day it flooded. They managed to get all the mules out, but there's track underground, and some of the mining equipment is still buried beneath. You folks from West Reading, why I'm missing, this is right on the border, who remember the old, what do they call it, the Conrad Weiser Lake.
That's right.
Yeah, the Conrad Weiser Lake.
Well, that parking garage is now.
Yeah, that's over in there. The mine shafts, the tunnels went as far as Penn Avenue. That's how far they went. Very interesting. One day, the water shot out, the mine flooded, they fled for their lives, and that was the end. Remember when they got rid of that little by little, when they started tearing down Penn Street during urban renewal, they brought truck after truck of rubble across the Penn Street viaduct over to there, and they used it to fill it in, and people said, my God, that water's all going to go into everybody's basement, and it never did.
How deep was the mine?
How far down? Half as, I said, about 4 stories, about half as high as Pomeroy's. It went down rather considerably. It would have been twice the depth at the Historical Society is the height of the Historical Society, but twice that distance. Sightsinger's Iron Mine, West Reading. You would park there today. I was fascinated with that building in the background. There's a house there with a bit of a barn. I can't imagine exactly where that was.
Is that where the Scottish Rites?
The Scottish Rite, you would park there at the cathedral. Yeah. As a matter of fact, there are still 3 trees, those huge trees there near the Scottish Rite Cathedral that were around the lake at the time that the lake was still there. 3 of those trees survived. This is the first page in the new book. Fred Yeager had a photograph gallery at 433.5 Penn Street. Almost all the old-time stereo views that pop up at flea markets were issued by Fred Yeager, who happened to be an artist as well. I've seen some of his paintings. They vary from pretty good to pretty bad. But he is best remembered as a photographer. This, people drive by on a regular basis, and I'm sure that they have no idea what that is. That is behind the schoolhouse at 4th and Elm. Remember, there's a schoolhouse at 4th and Elm. Actually, It's at Elm and Madison Avenue. The back of the schoolhouse would be right to the immediate right of this picture. That was the Keystone Brewery. I had a good friend who just passed away within the last year, who was a retired city detective, who said that quite a number of years ago he had gone down into the basement of this thing and the vault was still there. He went down these steps and the vault went diagonally beneath Madison Avenue to some place behind the old Medical Arts building. So that's what's left of the old Keystone Brewery. It disappeared about 1904 as far as actual operation. But you can see, if you look very carefully, where the vaulted door was where the wagons went in to load up years ago. Interesting picture. I had this because this is the block that probably no one watching remembers. This is the 900 block of Chestnut Street, and they had a row of homes there. Those homes were torn down in the 1920s to make way for Freihoffer's Bakery Building. Some of you people who remember Freihoffer's Bakery Building on Chestnut Street will know what I'm talking about. After they moved, it became a depot for the Reading School District. They kept books in there, they kept desks and whatever, and then the building burned, and today there's a parking lot. So none of those homes in that whole lineup, they all look the same. All of them from the Civil War, late Civil War era. Probably no one who's watching this will have any recollection. That was 927, 927 Walnut Street. This was a surprise to me because I didn't remember that Imbers had ever been in this building at 7th and Penn. Most of us will remember that as Reed's Department Store at 7th and Penn at the railroad. It says Imber Brothers above the door. And what happened was, talk about bad timing. They were like Mr. Fichthorn, who went into the mechanical phonograph business in the very year that mechanical phonographs died. Imbers opened that store, would you believe, 1 month before the Depression, before the great crash of October of 1929. Needless to say, they didn't stay there very long. They moved across the street. Imbers, you remember Imbers, Missies and ladies and children's wear. But they did very well when they opened their first store in the 1920s up the street, and then later on they wound up being on Penn Street down in the 500 block, and I think they were there until somewhere in the late 60s or around 1970. I had that exact information at home. I'm going to go through these fairly fast. This came to us from a gentleman who lives in California, who has a great interest in Reading and Berks, grew up here. There are very few group photographs that I have seen, but they were actually building the pagoda. There are hundreds of pagoda postcards, but the actual photographs of people building the place are few and far between. Those of you with good eyesight see that there are 3 workers up there on the roof line doing some finishing touches to the pagoda, and it would have been the year 1908. By the way, the pagoda was never really quite finished, but it was 1908. Interesting photograph. Now this might possibly ring a bell. You recognize the operating room of the homeopathic hospital, which some of us will remember as Community General Hospital, which is today sort of an adjunct of the St. Joseph, St. Joseph Hospital's Community Center. That was an operating room in the old homeopathic hospital. By the way, in the 1934, twice they changed the name. First of all, no one could spell it. Homeoeopathic. So they made it easier.
P-I-T-A-L?
Yeah, right. They got rid of one of the O's. And then in 43, they changed the name to Community General. They finally gave up on the homeopathic. By that time, all the physicians were no longer homeopathic physicians either. But one of their famous physicians was Dr. William A. Heyman, the photographer, Berks County's finest photographer of the 1890s, served 50 years. It opened in 1891. He retired in 1941 and died the year later in 1942. Remember Dr. Hassler? Do you remember her? 60 years she was in practice.
Yes.
Dr. Hassler.
I remember her. She did
60 years. That's
my
quite a
physical
record.
when I went in training.
Oh, really?
I'm giving my age away.
Oh. Well, she served 60 years. She was probably there, and you said when you were training, she was probably there in the 70s and the 80s.
Right.
I'm kidding.
Before that,
Before
George.
that was it.
Ooh.
Okay. I'm at the 4th Street cut. Looking westward along the railroad tracks. The reason for this photograph was because of the Mount Penn Stove Works. They made thousands and thousands of stoves. The address used to be given as North 3rd and Lebanon Valley Railroad. That was always the address that was given for the wedding. Then I went back. This is a recent picture. I just noticed within the last year they tore away part of the complex, and that's what it looked like sometime earlier.
Looking the opposite way.
No, you're looking the same way. Only I was at this bridge rather than the...
Ah, okay, I see.
3rd and Elm Hotel. Interesting story about that. That's a rather commodious structure, and if you notice on the far left is the house where the proprietor always lived. We're going to go back 100 years to see what it looked like inside. And that's what it looked like inside. Rather impressive. It was owned for quite a while by Deppens until they went out of business. That place, I remember, I was inside there any number of times. Those who have been around for a while might remember the Knights of Malta Temple, which was at 4th and Court. They tore that wonderful Heaster-Muhlenberg mansion down later on in the Knights of Malta. When you would go in the front door and turn left, that was the big parlor. They had a fireplace in there so large you could park a VW inside it. I remember as a child looking at that thing and walking inside, looking up and being astounded at how big. I never saw a fireplace that big in my life. They tore that down to make way for WEEU Radio, which occupies that corner of 4th and Court. Okay, we're going to take a break and go back to...
Me.
To you.
Me.
Yes, absolutely.
We have a couple notes for your calendar here. We invite you to make September 12th a Saturday. We just talked about our rifle exhibit opening. We invite you to make a day of it at the Historical Society, because that same day, down at our Victorian Hendel House at 746 Center Avenue, directly across from Center Park, from 11 to 4, when we typically have open houses down there from 11 to 3. But on Saturday, September 12th, we're going to have a Ragtime Willie entertainment that includes a chicken or roast pork sandwich on the Hendel House porch. So sit back and enjoy our listening to Ragtime Willie play, and you can certainly feel free to take out some lunch or take out some dinner or stock up your freezer with some wonderful food. Tickets are only $10 for the entertainment and can be obtained at this Historical Society. So that's Saturday, September 12th from 11 to 4 at our Hendel House, 746 Center Avenue.
And that $10 includes something to eat.
It certainly does.
And the music.
And
that's going to be neat. You know what? On a nice day, there's nothing nicer than being in that porch of the Hendel House.
And you're right across from Center Park, so it's a beautiful area of the city.
Yes, it really is.
And our second calendar note, we invite you to pack our bags. Yes, it's time again to go on the property tour. Janice Longlot, our tireless, fearless leader, has been put together another wonderful tour this year. Where are we going this year, Janice?
Well, do you have, do they have the poster?
Yeah, they have a poster right there.
Well, this year we're touring Greenwich Township, Maxatawny, and it's October 3rd. It's 9 to 4, and we do have the bus, which George won't be on. But Charlie Adams from WEU, he will be the tour, the host for the bus tour.
Now, we only have a certain number of seats available for the tour, so please make your reservations
46,
early.
Actually.
And it's $50 a person for that.
$50 a person. The tour, drive on your own, is $22. And this year, at one of the sites, you'll be able to purchase food, and you'll also have a rest stop there. There'll be restroom facilities at Site 6. You will have several sites where you can purchase your ticket. I don't know, there they are. Okay, there's at least 15 sites in the county that you can purchase your ticket.
Which will be available by mid-September.
Yes. Well, we hope it'll be ready by the 15th, and then we'll get the books and the ticket. It'll be a book like this, which will describe all the sites. There'll be 8 sites, And then in the book, you'll get a ticket and you'll get a wristband. And when you enter a site, someone will check to make sure you have a ticket and you are wearing your wristband, or you can't get in. So we do want you to enjoy the tour, but also respect the site owner's property. So we don't like any strollers or backpacks. They have to be kept outside.
That graphic that was just on the screen, I want to mention that, Janice, I know we have a chance to look at it still. That is a sneak peek. That is a first time here, right on BCTV. Breaking news. This is the cover for this year's tour guidebook.
The actual cover.
It's not as many properties as last year, but there's a beautiful selection of properties. I think one of my favorite, I haven't seen it yet either myself. Usually the staff and the property volunteers, we have the pre-tour beforehand. But there's a wonderful property, I think that's the barn in the bottom right.
Yes.
There are actually two distinct properties because they're owned by two individuals now, two individual owners. We have the original farmhouse and then the barn right across the street, and I can't wait to get inside that barn.
You will love it.
That's the place with the old creamery on the corner.
Yes.
Oh, I know. Oh, that's a very interesting.
George Sunday's farm.
Yes. Okay. That's right.
And then the farmhouse was right beyond the creamery, and across the road was the barn.
That's a very interesting, that barn building is a very interesting property.
Right.
That really is. I've seen that about a year or two. Reverend Heckler and I visited there, and depending what time of the year you go, there are all kinds of chestnuts lying around. So take your paper bag.
Now, new this year, we will have, I don't have a gizmo with me, but Mr. Bertolet, our executive director, we've talked about, you'll have GPS coordinates for each of the properties. Now, even though we number the properties in order from 1 to 8, you don't have to necessarily follow them in numerical order. You can follow them in any way you wish, but we do advise you not to linger too long at each property so you have ample time to see the entire tour. Now, Janice mentioned ticket prices were $22. That's in advance. A day of tickets are $25, so save $3, buy early.
Right. And they will be sold day of tour, probably at all the sites, but mostly at the Historical Society. And because if you don't start by probably 9, 10 o'clock, you know, if you just won't get to visit all the sites.
Last year we were over towards Wilmelsdorf. It's a beautiful area. I had people, I was at the Charming Forge property, I had people starting the tour at 3 o'clock.
Oh my God.
So you can start whenever you wish, but if you'd like to see other properties, we do recommend you start early. Should we list off the sites where tickets are available in advance, do you think, Janice? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Let's
like we said, the ticket sales will be available by mid-September. This is a little bit of a list, so please bear with me. In advance, you'll be able to buy the tickets at the Historical Society at 940 Center Avenue, Green Valley Nursery in Sinking Spring, Esben Shade's Greenhouse in Fleetwood, Boyer's Food Market in Wilmelsdorf, Dietrich's Meats at the Blinking Light in Lenhartsville,
Bloomsville.
Sorry, Croomsville, of course. Boone Area Library in Birdsboro, the Boyertown Community Library, Boyertown, the Mifflin Community Library in Shillington, the Village Library in Morgantown, the Burnville Area Community Library in Burnville, Riverview Nursery in Temple, Brandywine Community Library in Topton. Just in case you're tuning in, these are all the places you can buy the tickets in advance. The Wyomissing Public Library in Wyomissing, the Mifflin Community Library in Shillington, and the Lewis Gonser Community Library in Kurztown. So we'd like to thank the libraries very much for selling tickets for us. This is a first for us. And
to use the libraries, which they were very eager to do that.
We're very appreciative of that. And we'll also like to include, so we can't thank them enough, our sponsors for the tour, William G. Cuck and Associates, Associated Construction, Comcast, the Auxiliary of the Historical Society of Berks County, the Highlands of Wyomissing, PB Berks Village, Land Displays. Keep an eye out for their wonderful banners throughout the county of the tour. Reading Eagle Press, Reese Design, Vista Insurance, and White and Hammer. We'd like to thank you very much for making this tour possible.
And actually, we're doing a lecture on September the 26th Patrick Dunmoyer from Kutztown University will present a program. It's Barn Stars, a necessary revelation of a folk tradition. Patrick was supposed to be our guest tonight. I hope nothing serious happened to him.
He's homeworking on the program.
But he's done research on barn stars. And in this area, Greenwich Township and Maxatawny, there are a lot of barn stars. And he has a nice story to tell you. So I hope you can join that Saturday the 26th. That's at 10 a.m. And that's like a small preview to talk about that area, what you're going to see.
It'll be a similar format to our first Saturday series. Now this month we'll have the first Saturday, the rifle exhibit opening on Saturday, September 12th, which is actually the second Saturday, and this special preview program for the tour is actually on the last Saturday. So
right. So
great.
That should be interesting.
Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I've done some tours up there, and I know George has been up there many times. It feels like an out-of-the-way place, but it's absolutely beautiful up there.
It's a great area.
And at that time of the year, it'll absolutely...
Very remote.
Yeah.
I only got lost 5 times. But you always get somewhere.
And one of those 5, I was with Janice.
The road goes somewhere, and you can find your way home again.
It's not about getting lost, it's about finding your way home again.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you very much, Janice.
You're welcome.
We're looking forward to that. By the way, are there 2 photographs back there on the graphics camera?
Yes.
Of the a quick comment about this. These were taken this past Sunday. We have Sean Chrisman and his son Nate. What happened was, in 1910, the Ole Turnpike Company replaced many of their locust 3-cornered mileposts with new locust mileposts. Well, within the last several years, every one of those old posts in Exeter Township fell over, the ones that were surviving. There were about 4 until fairly recent years. And the last one on Ole Turnpike right near Limekill just simply fell over. It was hollow, carpenter ant infestation and dry rot, because they had been there really for 99 years. Anyhow, the gentleman who's standing there, Sean Chrisman, was kind enough to replicate one of the original ones. You see the damaged one lying there, and what you see there is the new milepost for on the Ole Turnpike, the only one that exists now in Exeter Township, because all the others have just simply gone the way of old mileposts. So that stands at the corner of the Ole Turnpike and Limekill Road, right next to the old Ole Line Hotel building at 800 Limekill Road. Was replaced last. I didn't realize that you can't buy big pieces of locust anymore, because apparently all the locust trees are sort of hollowed out and they're just totally unavailable.
There are a number of companies that make a fair amount of money. When a building is demolished, they'll salvage the wood inside.
Salvage
there's also the companies that, in known areas of logging, when they used to float logs down the river or on the lake, they've gone back and explored lake beds and river beds for old logs that have sunken. Because there are certain kinds of wood you just can't get anymore.
No, you just can't get anymore.
Not to mention the size of the old boards back then.
That's it. Now, that was made of white oak. Notice the sign that says to Pleasantville, 6 miles, and on the other side it says to Black Bear Hotel, 4 miles. Do not go looking for Black Bear Hotel.
No vacancy.
Yes, it hasn't been there since about 1959. Black Bear Hotel stood where European Motors is today, right off 422, across from the Monpen Family Restaurant. If you walk out, or that place where they sell Rita's Ice.
Oh, yes.
If you walk across the street from Rita's Ice or the Monpen Family Restaurant, walk across 422, and begin going down the hill on the left-hand side, you'll see European Motors, I think that's what it's called, and the old Black Bear Hotel, where Jackie Gleason had played in the 1930s, used to stand on that site. So the Ole Turnpike went from the Black Bear Hotel 10 miles to the hotel building that stands in Pleasantville on the corner. So Exeter now has one new milepost on the Ole
It
Turnpike.
took 99 years.
And it only took 99 years, yes.
Okay.
I think we have time. You have anything you want to mention yet?
I think we're good.
We're good? Okay, let's have a couple more pictures.
Make sure you come to our rifle opening on Saturday, September 12th at 10 o'clock.
And when is Ragtime really going to be?
The starts at 1 hour later, 11 to 4, down at the Handel House, 746 Center.
$10, choice of good food. Pat Perfect is working with that project, and whatever Pat Perfect works on is always worthwhile. You will enjoy it.
So come have a continental breakfast at the rifle opening and finishing up with lunch and dinner down at the Handel House.
Down at the Handel House on the front porch. Maybe we have, are we okay? Why isn't that going? Help. Why isn't it advancing?
Stand by, technical difficulties.
Aha. A Penn Street picture. I apologize for being a little bit on the small side. Penn Street picture. It was taken. Let me see. We're in the 300 block, I guess. It was a war drive. Notice the Model A Ford, and seated in the front seat, I'm seeing both Mr. Hitler and Hirohito. It was one of those drives, one of those novelty drives that they had during the war for scrap metal. And I looked at that picture and I had to smile because the one boy's wearing knickers. I was the last kid in Charles Foos in the 1940s wearing knickers, and I hated them. So I slid on the cement coping to make sure that I ruined them, and I managed to do that. And there's a boy with an express wagon. Every kid back in the 40s had an express wagon, myself included.
Is that before the radio flyer became popular?
Well, that's an older one than the radio flyer. That's an interesting picture. Many of us enjoy Bachman pretzels, and there we see the Bachman's Steam Pretzel Bakery. The fellow who started that was at a number of locations. This particular picture was taken on North 8th Street, and it was Joseph Bachman, 836 North 8th. And in the 1920s, when his son became involved, they opened another plant out there in the Kutztown Road, where you associate Bachman's being today, and then they closed this place. That wagon used to deliver pretzels in and around the city of Reading.
Still in business today, over on Spring Valley Road.
Yes, right. If you see the original to this, and I apologize if some of the detail is lost on the screen, that's a very, very interesting picture. That's Nathan Holman, who was a tinsmith, rather advanced in years. If you'd see the actual photograph, you'd see how advanced in years he really was. The location was 212 South 6th Street. And looking at the picture and the way things are there, I would say that he was in the twilight of the tinsmith business. This is a fascinating picture. I've owned this for many, many years, and it wasn't until I decided I was going to improve it a little bit with Photoshop that I blew it way up. And to my astonishment, and this, by the way, is one of those Fred Yeager pictures, the fellow standing there on the left was put there in a fake sort of way. He was cut out and pasted on that picture, and then they rephotographed it. And I never knew that until I blew it way up to check it with Photoshop. And that's a fakey picture. That is the Neversick Mountain trolley on the trestle above the Glen. Where was the Glen? Well, if you go to Forest Hill Cemetery and you walk way, way, way back towards the river.
Or drive down Clapperthal Road.
Or drive down Clapperthal Road, yeah.
Get to the end. When you hit the mountain, go up to the right. It's right there.
Yeah. There was an old road, a dirt road, on the upper side of Forest Hill Cemetery.
That's Clapperthal Road.
Oh, that's Clapperthal Road?
Yep.
Is that open today?
Yes, it's a paved road.
A paved road?
Yes, it is.
It's been a while since I was there.
I was just there about 2 weeks ago on an early Monday morning.
On the upper side of Forest Hill Cemetery?
On the north side. You can get there from West Neversink Road. That's
yeah,
it's paved.
Because the last time I was there was my Model A Ford, and it was a dirt road, and I surprised two people. That's a whole other story. Oh. Isn't that a wonderful picture? That's down in the Glen, a picture made available to us by Jim Hofford of Moulton. But isn't that a beauty? If you see the original, folks, it's gorgeous. And the old Glen Hotel is in the background there on the right-hand side. That is the best picture I have ever seen of a Neversick Mountain car. when you look at the original, you can actually read. Remember, folks, those who are old enough to remember the trolleys, how they used to have those placards inside along the sides, up near the roof? Well, you can actually read some of those placards that are in there. One of the best pictures I've ever seen. Isn't that a dandy? That is a station wagon. It looks like a gypsy wagon or a medicine man's wagon. That was the station wagon for the White House Hotel that used to be on South 9th Street. Remember, you would go South 9th from Penn, past the Reading Brewery, and you would start climbing the hill, and on the right-hand side was the old White House Hotel. And the White House Bottling Works was right across the street. You can still see water running out the side of the mountain, but they used to sell spring water and bottle sodas and that sort of thing. What was the name of that family? Drubik or Dropic? The last people to operate the White House. I have never seen another picture of that, of this particular wagon. Close up, I have run two pictures, this one and also a really close view so that you can see the interesting design on that wagon. By the way, what you see there on the left-hand side at the extreme edge of the picture is the bank building, which was torn down to make way for the bank that's there today, right up from Stichter's Hardware. Reading Cold Storage. Some of us, well, that's still there. Its days, I'm afraid, are numbered. I have a very interesting history of that. It started out in the days when people who sold produce, whatever, would keep butter and eggs there for periods of time. And in the days before most households had a refrigerator with an ice unit, because most of us remember when you were lucky to have space for 2 trays of ice cubes. But in the days before that sort of thing, and people would go hunting and would have a large piece of meat, they could take it to the ice house and keep it there. I wonder how many of our home viewers remember the old ice house on Hudson Street, which was the one that I knew as a kid. We would go there to the Hudson Street Ice House. This is a really interesting story. The picture looks like it's absolutely nothing. But those of you who remember when there were blocks and blocks of garages for rent, because there was a time when you weren't allowed to have your automobile out overnight on the streets of Reading. That's why they built all the... Anyhow, we thank you for watching our program, which is on the first Wednesday of each month at 7, repeats Friday at 10, Saturday at 6, and Sunday morning at 9 a.m. We thank Patrick, and we thank both Patricks who were with us, and we thank Janice and we thank Joshua for their contribution to today's show.
Thank you.
And by the way, 1 week ago, I had a celebration, my 50th anniversary of being a member of the Historical Society of Berks County. In the last week in August, I joined 50 years ago. And it's beginning to show. Thanks for watching. So long, folks.
The Historical Society on BCTV is supported in part by the Highlands at Wyomissing.